in entrepreneurship is something's always on fire. And really you're running around with, your fire extinguisher, just trying to put out the biggest fire and then work your way down to the smallest fires.
Welcome to Analog Leader. Our guest today is Mike Peterson. Mike, welcome.
Hey, happy to be here.
Good to have you. I was excited when I sent you a text message and asked if there was a chance that we could get you on. I was reaching out there hoping to pull in an old favor, and man, you answered it right away. So I really appreciate that.
No, happy to do it. Love it.
So what we're going to talk about today is your relationships with people, from hourly workforce all the way up to the customers that you see on a regular basis. And you kind of, as an owner of two different companies, have a wide range of people that you influence on a daily basis. And I'd like to learn what are your secrets to making those relationships good, and to the skills, we call them analog skills, that require your presence, your genuine authenticity, and the things that require you to be personal with people. What are the skills that you use on a regular basis that way? So I'm going to ask you a series of questions and whatnot, but I really just want to have an open conversation with you about that.
Shoot. Open book.
Okay, so tell us about your businesses.
So Critical Laser is, we're 34, turning 35 this year. Started in 1992. I was 11 or 12 at the time when it started, and worked there with my dad. So he was an employee and then ended up buying it with a couple partners. Then after I graduated college, I bought one partner in 2006, I bought another partner in 2011. And Dad and I were partners until the end of 24, and he retired. And so I bought him out of that company. And Critical is a CNC laser cutting metal fabrication shop. So we service all sorts of clients across different industries: construction, signage, off-road, manufacturers, mostly steel, stainless steel, aluminum. We do laser cutting and forming. And then Spire Ranges is my other business, and we do shooting range equipment and installation and construction. So military, law enforcement, private sector, residential homes. Typically we won't build the building, but we'll put all the range equipment, bullet traps, target systems, software, acoustics, all that. We can stick that inside the box. So that one's 10 years old. So started in 2015, 2016. And I got actually brought in by a capital company there in 2020. So I've been there since 2020. Okay.
So your clients, really for both of these organizations, are spread across the globe, aren't they?
Yeah. So Critical Laser's got work all over the place. Sometimes we don't know where it goes. Spire Ranges is definitely global. We've got work in Nigeria, Bahrain, Denmark, Poland, Mexico, Brazil. Most of the bulk of our work is here in the United States. But yeah, we're all over.
So I've been in your shop at Critical Laser, and it's an amazing shop. The CNC machines in there and the laser cutting machines they're fascinating to see all of that technology that goes into it. But aside from that technology, you have a pretty good hourly workforce, right?
Yeah. Yep, for sure. The bulk of our workforce is on an hourly setup. We only have a few salary staff at Critical. So, but all the way from our typically called labor guys that are, just picking up parts off the ground and counting them, stacking them, getting them ready to go, to our quality control team, to our laser operators, our CNC operating team. We have some professionals up front that do our drafting and CAD using SolidWorks and DraftSite. And so, yeah, we're kind of across the board.
And I'm guessing it's the same kind of thing in the Spire Range shop, that there's a lot of hourly folks there.
Yeah. We actually have less hourly folks at Spire. So more professionals there, which is definitely a different paradigm for the way we manage those teams. So at Spire, we obviously have management staff, our ops guys, and then we have a drafting engineer, a mechanical engineer, a mechatronics engineer. So yeah, those guys are more, and then our sales team. So yeah, more professional on that side than hourly labor, like at Critical Laser.
So as an owner in both of these organizations, you're dealing with people who are, like, as you said, picking stuff off the floor and stacking it up and getting ready for a shipment.
Yeah, for sure.
All the way up to people who are highly educated engineers, sales professionals, and kind of everything in the realm of experience, from that hourly worker to an engineer or a sales team. How do you manage the different range of relationships from that group of people?
Oh, it's complicated. It's complicated. Yeah, they respond significantly different to different interactions. My daily guys at Critical Laser, they're pretty happy-go-lucky, coming to work and doing their thing. You can bring in a box of donuts, and they're like, donuts, right? They're really excited. If you bring donuts to the engineering staff at Spire, they're like, cool, donuts.
Yeah.
Right. Like they just, the way, and the way they interact as teams is really different. Yeah. Really different. And I don't know if I would say that's an education level thing. I would say it's a personality type deal. Engineers, accountants, attorneys, right? Doctors, you say, you always hear the cliche, like they've got different personalities, and they do. The engineering team is very detailed. They're very specific. They enjoy bantering back and forth on, tolerances of equipment and how to build something, and the labor team is significantly different. They really like specific direction. So they want to know, okay, what do you need me to do today? Hey, pick up those parts, count them, stick them in a box. Cool. And those are different than the sales staff who don't tell them what to do at all. Like they have a goal and don't tell them how to get there.
Yeah.
So yeah, really different.
That's awesome. I think that it's one of those things where, when I was an hourly worker, I never saw myself moving into leadership, or certainly not management or the CEO of a company as I am now. I really saw myself as a worker bee, and somebody who really enjoyed knowing what the end of the task looked like and being able to get to that point. Seeing the physical work get done, and then be able to say, all done. There it is.
Yeah. Yeah. There's parts of my day where I really miss working out in the laser shop, where I could get to the end of the day and be like, hey, there's my palette of parts, right? Like this is what I created during the day, versus sometimes sitting at my desk where I'm not exactly sure what I got all the way accomplished by the end of the day.
For sure. I think it's more intense on your end, but I think about an engineer sitting down at a computer and designing a target range that has motion and everything else in it, and all the different moving parts that he has to take from his brain and put into a program that then goes to a drawing that goes to a workforce that's going to build it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it goes out to different vendors where they're making different components. We're ordering motors and control systems and PLCs, and all that has to come back and get put back together, and then we ship it out to a range. So there's a long process before the engineer sees what his idea was come to life, for sure.
Yes. It's a long waiting process.
Yeah.
From he knows exactly what he wants to build, but to actually seeing it to a place where people are using it.
Yeah.
It can be a year or longer.
It can be a long time. Yeah, so we spent a lot of 2025. Our team spent a lot of time building a new system. So they revamped a handful of parts that we're using, and those new ranges are just coming online, and they're pretty excited to see them go.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So they spent a whole year designing them.
Wow, there's a lot that goes into those kind of things. If I go to a range, I don't even think about everything that goes into it. I just know what's there and that it works.
Yeah, literally moving parts. There's a lot of moving parts.
So, give me an average day for Mike Peterson.
Sprinting. I'm sprinting from thing to thing almost all the time. So I live in Pleasant Grove. The closest office to me is Critical Laser in Linden. And so that's where I start my day, usually between 6:30-ish, 6:30 and 7, I get to the office, and start immediately dumping through the email box and just kind of clearing out what I can before our first meeting starts. First meeting starts at 8 a.m. That's our production meeting. And that's all the production staff, leadership staff at Critical. Then we got various meetings in the morning, people shadowing outside the door until around lunchtime. And then the lunchtime is when I swap. I head to our office for Spires here in Springville. And then I sort of repeat that process. I've got a sales meeting on Wednesdays, production meetings on Tuesdays, new project meeting is on Thursday. I've found that the organization is the key to being productive for me, managing both places and both teams. And it's really important to have good management leadership at both of those places. So because you're, like you mentioned in the beginning, your physical presence is important. Each place only gets about half my physical presence. And it definitely changed the dynamic. I was at Critical long before I was at Spire, and my lack of physical presence at Critical, it's definitely felt, it's a big deal.
Yeah. So you brought something up that I think is critically important for our listeners to understand. If you don't schedule your day, and if you don't try and stick to that schedule, and you just let priorities push you around, how would that affect your businesses?
The joke we always make in entrepreneurship is something's always on fire. And really you're running around with, your fire extinguisher, just trying to put out the biggest fire and then work your way down to the smallest fires. If you don't have a schedule, someone will stand outside your door and just wait to bring you the next problem constantly. And then even if you're walking around the shop or the office, when you pop by, I think the staff sees you as, they don't get a lot of your time. And so they want to spring that problem on you while you're right there. And so you kind of you've got to schedule your time. You need formal structured meetings for production, for sales, new projects, cash flow, all that has to be in a structured meeting. And then in those other meetings, those things will pop up. And they'll be like, hey, can we talk about this? And we talk about that. And you have to draw a line and say, that is not this meeting. That's the next meeting. And we're utilizing some technology. We're using AI to record our meetings, and it's bringing out action items and things. But you got to have structure. Yeah, structure is important.
I agree. And I think technology is one of those things that if we use it to serve us, it does a great job of serving us. But if we use it to schedule us and to set our priorities for us,
it's not as great. Yeah, it's not as great. It's not as intuitive as, when you're in an actual person-to-person meeting with your team, you can glean, some of my team members. I have one team member specifically that has, in poker, you'd call him a tell. You can tell when he's stressed out. He breathes really deep, he rubs the back of his head, and you're kind of picking up on these physical cues of like, all right, he needs some extra, we gotta talk to him after this meeting, figure out exactly what's going on. And I feel like we actually don't get that in a Zoom meeting,
right,
or a remote conference call. And also AI won't pick up on those personal ticks, if you will, or nuances that you as a leader have to identify and circle back with that individual person later. You won't get that. AI won't pick that out of your meeting and make you an action item for that.
So really, really critical key point there that you brought up. That emotional intelligence that it takes to be able to recognize when someone's showing frustration and to actually feel their frustration is pretty important, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think we lose that. I'm lucky enough to not have a big remote workforce. My staff is in both offices most of the time, and I prefer that. I like the team atmosphere. I like the emotional intelligence that's happening from person to person. That personal interaction is important for our companies. I know different companies have different deals, but for us, that's a big deal.
Mm-hmm. When I was young, there was a show on television called Dragnet. I don't know if you're old enough to remember Dragnet, but
the reruns.
Okay. Well, so there was a detective on there, and when he was interviewing people, he'd say, "Just the facts, Jim. Just give me the facts." And I think that we focus on what are the facts, and we try to get to the point quickly. But sometimes when you're getting facts, you can gather every bit of the facts, but you really don't know what the frustration is.
Sure.
When we can get the facts and the feelings, get the emotional side of things, and know how that frustrates them, why it frustrates them, and how they feel about it, the sense of urgency is better conveyed.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. There's there's nuances to communicating with each member of your team. And I think it's important as a leader to view your people as part of your team. I try really, and I think vocabulary is really important. So you'll rarely ever hear me use the word employee or employer. I think those are really objectifying words.
Right.
So I think employees get fired, and they work for you, and employers do the firing and are like, this piece of the top of your org chart, the boss, the employer. And I think really it's detrimental as a leader to start viewing your people as objects that way.
Yeah.
When you objectify them as somebody who you could just get a new one all the time, like I'll just get another one. Like you can quit, I'll get a new you. That I think your staff feels that. Your team is aware of that emotional intelligence of feeling that they're expendable.
Right.
And if they feel like they're expendable, they're going to act like they're expendable.
Agree. I totally agree. So one of the things that, as we're talking, that strikes me is that you've got so many priorities going on and so many things to do. I think that a lot of times, especially frontline hourly workers, they don't see everything behind the scenes, and they don't realize the stress and everything that you go through on a daily basis. And then on top of all of that, Mike, you have a family.
Yeah, wife and 5 kids.
So a wife and 5 kids, and that, if you don't spend time on that, what happens?
Yeah, that's tricky. Balancing all those things can be hard. I was having a conversation actually the other day with my father-in-law, who's recently retired, and we were talking about work-life balance and is balance really a thing? And is it more cycle? When you have cycles of when your business is really crazy and it gets a lot of your focus, and your family gets less focus, and then when maybe your business is going well, your family could get more focus. Is that a cyclical deal, and not nearly a balanced thing? I've been lucky enough to work close to home. I worked with my dad for 25 years before he retired, and I think from him I learned real quick that man, you got to go to the baseball game. Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you a time where my dad missed one of my baseball games or a basketball game or a jiu-jitsu tournament or whatever it is I was up to. And sometimes that meant he went back to work that night, but being present at your business is as equally important as being present at home.
Yeah,
you got to be home.
I think there's a lot of owners and CEOs and high-level people who lose that part of their life, and it doesn't make their life better. It doesn't make their business better.
Yeah. No, I don't think so. Yeah, I think the last couple of years, I've unfortunately lost a few friends that have been pretty young, and some friends have had challenges with kids who've had cancer and other accidents and things going on. And my kids and family hear me say it all the time, but like, as long as my kids are healthy and my wife kisses me goodnight, everything else is extra. I live in that bubble of, because you can be filthy rich, you can be Jeff Bezos, you can be whoever you want to be, but man, you got a sick kid, right? You got a kid with cancer that you can't fix. That you can't throw money at that problem.
Yeah.
Your wife doesn't like you because you're a jerk. You can't throw, she doesn't want a new car. You could ask Ashley, I'm like, yeah, I'll buy you a new car. She's like, I'd rather you come home. Like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, that's not what they want. They really want your time. So, healthy kids, a wife who kisses me, that's everything else is extra after that.
That's excellent perspective. Excellent perspective. So let's take that down to the shop floor. I know that you have some people who have been working for you for a lot of years.
Yeah, a long time.
So why do they stay?
Wow, that's a good question. I think sometimes that's okay. I think I would say atmosphere, culture, all the buzzwords you want to throw around. But candidly, it's hard to find a new job. I think sometimes you end up with people on your team that should not be on your team anymore, but they're not out looking for a job because it's hard to find another job. Or, it's what's that old saying? Like you'll make a change when it hurts enough. When it gets painful enough is when you'll try to do something different. And sometimes that gets really painful for the company, where the person's willing to ride it out, and you got to step in and say, hey, either you change or we change, but it's not working. But I think for us at Critical Laser and Spire, I know I've got a handful of guys off today because their boys literally have baseball games. They're playing in a tournament in Orem, and a couple of them FaceTimed me yesterday because their boys were playing each other, and they were like, "Hey, we're not at work because we're watching baseball," and we try to support that. If your kid has a play at school or the Halloween parade or a baseball game, whatever's going on, we try to make sure that's a priority. That's where you should be.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of, we're really family oriented. It's not odd to see any of our team, spouse bounce in for lunch, or kids, my own kids are around the office. We try to make a family atmosphere at work, and it works for us. We have small teams, right? I've got 10 or 11 at one place and 10 or 11 at the other. And so I can name everybody's spouse. I can name everybody's kids. Those are the size of teams that I am comfortable and I would say prefer to manage.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really important too. I love that you said you know who they are, their spouse, their kids. Tell me how you learn that. What do you do? What motivates you to go out there and learn about these people?
I think viewing them as people, and not just cogs in our machine wheel. They're not just another motor in what we're doing, but that they are people, right? We spend a lot of time together at work. Most people spend more time at work than they spend at home. That's definitely true for anybody who's working 8 to 10 hours a day. Mm-hmm. So they're people, and they've got wives and kids and husbands and grandkids and things going on. And I think a responsible business owner or leader understands that work shouldn't be life. It just can't be. So you have to look at them as people who have other priorities. And you can see sometimes that people are agitated or stressed out at work, and it's not always a work thing, right? They've got something at home. They might have a sick kid or a schedule or, a budget issue or whatever is going on. Like, work isn't always why they're unhappy at work. Sometimes things at home are stressors that bleed into their work attitude.
For sure. Every one of us has a life, and that life can sometimes get messy.
Yeah.
So I think that's important to understand that balance, and I commend you for recognizing that people are people. One of the things, we work with a lot of large companies, and I tell all of the leaders who will give me the time to listen that every key performance indicator that they measure is delivered by an hourly worker.
Yeah.
Is that true in your business, that everything that goes to a customer somehow touches the hands of an hourly worker?
Yeah, I mean, at Critical, the customer will place an order by talking to either Curtis or Cole, and or even Julie, who's our front office lady. She will either take that repeat order and call up the work that we've had before, and then she sends it to Danny, who's the production lead, and he's going to schedule it out to Jet or Hinckley, who is running lasers or press brakes. Jack or Felipe or Chase are going to pull those parts off the laser. They're going to clean them, count them, stack them, check them for quality, mark the boxes, put them on a pallet, wrap that pallet up. All that happens without me touching it, right? I mean, those hourly team members, they touch everything. Yeah. And then when I get to my desk and I'm looking at the P&L for the month, and I'm like, well, how many parts did we make? And how much money did we make on those parts? And did we hit our hourly rates? Well, it all depends on how they did their job when they touched each part.
Yeah. The businesses of the world are built on the backs of frontline workers.
For sure.
Everything that is delivered to a customer eventually, somehow touches the hands of a frontline worker. And supervising those frontline workers is one of the areas that we've seen as kind of a gap in training. People get promoted, and I'm sure it's the same in your place. Somebody will work for you for a while and they do a great job, and you'll say, okay, I want you to lead this team. People get promoted to those positions, and on that day, you lose your best worker and you gain a supervisor who doesn't know anything about leading people. And that gap of what do we do to give those people the skills that they need in order to lead people is really what we want to focus on with Analog Leaders. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about what are the skills that the people who report to you but lead your teams, what are the skills that you look for in those people?
We're hoping that they also look at that team member as a person. It is easy to get focused on your performance indicators and looking at those numbers, and then those numbers turn people into numbers. So we want them to understand also that that's how we view our team as members of our team or members of our staff. We're looking for somebody who wants to show the line guys how to do it the right way. I can take my best laser operator and he's really good. But sometimes I'll have a mentality of it's quicker if I do it. And so they won't show the younger guys or the younger members of the team how to do something because it's just quicker if I do it. And then they get in there and they do it. But the problem is obviously is, okay, but that means you got to keep doing it. And we have to teach this guy how to do it the way you do it, or you're always going to keep doing it. And now I've given you all these leadership responsibilities, and you're in charge of the schedule, and you're in charge of quality control, and you're in charge of all this stuff, but you're also doing your old job because you didn't show anybody else how to do it. So that's a key thing they've got to learn to pass off those responsibilities and teach that same level of quality to the younger generation coming up of what we expect and how we do that. But yeah, we're looking for someone who wants to teach.
Yeah. That's perfect insight that way. I was in a place in Kansas here just a few weeks ago, and a maintenance manager who had started off as a forklift operator in their warehouse and moved up through different jobs and moved into maintenance, went to night school while he could and learned how to do some electrical maintenance, then became an electrician in the company, moved to a lead person, supervisor, and now is the department manager. And I was asking him what his biggest frustrations were, and he says, I've got a whole bunch of 50-year-olds out there that know how to do the job, and they won't teach any of the young kids how to do it.
100%, that's true. Yeah.
I think it's that mentality that you're talking about. It's like, it's quicker if I do it. It's just quicker if I do it.
It is. This one time. It is right now. It is quicker if you do it right now. Mm-hmm. But it is not quicker the 50 other times that job has to be done again.
Yep.
So, and we have to tell our guys that, it right now, you're right, it's faster, but it won't be faster the next time it happens. And we have the same procedures all the time. So, everything that comes off the laser specifically has to be cleaned. We run it either through a time saver machine or a grinder, and we have quality control specs. Well, if you don't teach the guys who are supposed to be doing that how to meet those quality control specs, then, every time something comes off the laser, that spec has to be met. So, we're going to produce, tens of thousands of parts every month, and you can't look at all of them. You have to show those team members how to do that.
Yeah. Tribal knowledge, right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure, tribal knowledge. And for a small company, processes and procedures are hard. And specifically for critical, we, as a job shop, we have certain customers that they're very detailed, and the tolerances on laser are 5/1000ths of an inch, and they want them really dialed in. And sometimes we're cutting a sign for a ranch, and it's like, no man, just cut it out, give it to me. So getting consistency amongst the team members for, hey, these parts for this customer have to look like this, and these parts for this customer have to look like that. It's really difficult to write a manual to show these guys pictures of what everything's supposed to look like when your customer base is that broad.
So I've had the pleasure of seeing your work firsthand. If one of our listeners wants to see what does Critical do, what is Spire all about, how would they find you, and what do they do to see your work?
Yeah, so we both websites have really great pictures on them. So you can cruise to our criticallaser.com website or our spireranges.com website and see all the different things that we're into. Critical, we can end up with, we have like $100 minimum. If you'll spend $100 on something, we'll make it. And that can be, like I said, it could be a sign. It could be, last week, I think we made a top to a wedding cake. They wanted a very specific picture that we laser cut out, and it's going on somebody's wedding cake. All the way to parts for our shooting ranges at Spire, which are, 1/2-inch thick armor plate. So vast difference of things there. But Spire's a little different, right? Those are bigger ticket items. We don't do anything for $100 at Spire. We do some residential shooting ranges. That's probably the lowest cost part. Well, actually, that's not true. Spire does have a consumer line of steel targets. So you could go to Spire and find some portable steel targets that you can take out to the ranch or the mountains and shoot steel on. So we do have some lower things that you could get.
So again, that's Spire Ranges with an S.
Yep, spireranges.com
and criticalaser.com.
Yep.
I'm thinking that an analog leader sign right there, cut out.
We can handle that.
I think that would look
We
fantastic.
can handle that. Yeah. Send us a file. We will cut it out.
So a few things before we wrap this up. I've always been impressed by your work ethic, by all that you've accomplished in your career and in your life and your family life and your work life. I've always been inspired by you, and really, I mean, I've saw you from a distance and thought, there's a guy who has it all together, who really understands what life's all about. So I've always looked at you as someone that I see as somewhat of a mentor to me, even though you're significantly younger than me. I've always looked at you as an example. So how did you get where you are, and who are the people who have inspired you along your career and taught you some of these analog skills that you have and the way that you interact with people? Where did you learn all this?
I think a lot like you, I got a lot of time with my dad. You grew up ranching and farming and working with your dad, and I grew up in the laser shop working with my dad. So I learned a lot of my people skills from him. I learned a lot of my work ethic from him. I think small business owners and ranchers are pretty similar. 5 o'clock doesn't mean work's over, and it certainly doesn't start at 9 a.m. So there were days where we got up early and got to the shop because we had a deadline, and days we stayed through the night because we had a deadline. And I think there's kind of that saying, I joke with some friends all the time that, they're like, oh, it must be nice to be a business owner. You set your own schedule. And I remind them, it wasn't a year or two ago that I was working a graveyard shift. Someone had to do it, and it was me. And I got to work. I did my regular critical shift, and then I got to Spire, and I got that thing done. I went home and watched Nash play baseball and got some dinner, and then I went back to the shop and ran lasers till 2:30 or 3 in the morning. And I learned that from my dad. I've had a unique opportunity to be a part of a business owners group called Entrepreneurs Organization. And inside there, I've met a handful of really close friends in different industries that have showed me and shared insight of how their industry does things, which is different than the way, my industry standards have been. And sharing those have been really, really important to the way I've tried to develop my business structure. And in all honesty, I'm not an innovator. I'm a copycat. So I just look at what other people have been doing, and I'm like, that seems to be working really well. And I try to copy that.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. I think we all have a certain propensity to see what other people succeed with and model that. So you talked about your father and the influence that he had. Nash, your son, is here on a job shadow day. And tell me, what are the lessons that you want to pass off and that you do pass off to your children?
God, I think the thing I learned from my dad was, all the way until he retired, he was the guy that cleaned the bathroom at the shop. It wasn't odd to see him with a broom or, and I think what's important I learned from him was no matter what my title was, right? We talked about titles before we got started. I'm not above cleaning the bathroom. I enjoy pushing a broom around the shop. I like making the piles, and I like sweeping them up. I hope that my kids feel or see that example that I learned from my dad, that we're not above any work. And just because my title says owner or CEO or president of something, it doesn't mean that I don't get out there and get the job done. We have commitments as a company to make, and it doesn't matter, whose title it is to get that job done, but just the work has to be completed.
Yeah. That's an excellent lesson for people to learn. I think that the best business owners, the best CEOs, the best entrepreneurs are people who have done the work and aren't afraid of the work and know the importance of the work. Because as I said earlier, everything that is Critical Laser, is Spire, is delivered by an hourly associate somewhere along the way. So I think that not only not being afraid of that work, but honoring that work is important.
Yeah. I joke sometimes that my hands are softer than they used to be, but I got scars to prove where they've been, and so I don't get out of the shop as often as I like to, but we did it. Yeah, a lot of long hours.
Well, Mike, I appreciate everything that we've been able to talk about here today. I would like to ask one last ask of you. If you could give advice to someone who was just promoted to a supervisor position, they're going to run a team of 12 people, and it's their first time ever being a supervisor, a leader in the work setting, what advice would you give to that individual?
Set clear boundaries, be clear with your processes and procedures where you can, and recognize those are people. Those are people that work with you, not for you.
Excellent. That I love the way you said that. They work with you, not for you. I think that people get caught up on titles. We were talking about titles, as you said. People get caught up. I'm the boss now. I'm the supervisor. And the title isn't what gives you the authority to lead people. It's their acceptance of you as a leader, and whether or not they believe in you and are willing to follow you and work with you. That's where the authority truly comes from, don't you think?
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of examples throughout history, and one of them that's I think a fictional, but there's a great HBO special years ago called Band of Brothers, and there's a leader early in that show. In the first few episodes, Captain Sobel was his name, and horrible leader. And the whole, you could tell the storyline was setting up that he wasn't willing to do the work. It needed really a lot of the glory and attention and accolades needed to be his. And sometimes he was just grinding on the guys to grind on them. You got to recognize that, I don't have anybody who works for me at either place, right? Those are and I don't let them have the same thought process. Nobody works for anybody else. We work together as a team. But anything I do has direct correlation to my general operations manager, or to our office staff, or to our engineers. I don't make decisions until I call them, talk to them, get their insight on how whatever decision I'm going to make impacts their daily workload, responsibilities. You work with people. Nobody works for somebody else.
I think that's what sets up your success. Mike, I appreciate the time you spent with us. Is there anything that you'd like our audience to hear before we end this episode?
I get asked a question pretty frequently that I think is a pretty good question. Is like, hey, if you were to go back to 22 or 23-year-old you and give yourself some advice, knowing now, that's always a good question. What would you go back and fix? I'm a huge fan of vulnerability. And so I like, I'm not offended by a question of like, hey, tell me when you messed it up.
Yeah.
Give me an example of a mistake you made, or when you mishandled something, or it didn't go, the way you wanted it to. I think that's a powerful question, right? Because I think learning from your mistakes is huge.
Yep.
So, I can identify, I think I've become more passionate about my stance of people working with me, not for me, because in my younger years, I don't think I did that very well.
Is there anything that you'd like our audience to hear before we end this episode?
No, I think we covered it. I think we covered it. It was good to see you.
Okay, it's good to see you. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Thanks for tuning in to Analog Leader.